The morning shift aboard the research vessel Horizon started like any other day for Dr. Ben Torres. He walked through the gleaming corridors of the ship, carrying his tablet and a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Ben was the chief engineer on this mission, responsible for keeping all the ship's systems running smoothly as they traveled between star systems. The Horizon was not a military ship. It was a peaceful research vessel that carried scientists from 12 different alien species. Their mission was simple: explore new worlds, study different cultures, and help solve problems that affected everyone in the galaxy. Ben loved his job because it let him use his engineering skills to help others. As Ben entered the engineering bay, his assistant Romo looked up from a control panel. Romo was a Talarian, with blue skin and 4 arms that made him incredibly good at working on complex machinery. "Ben, we have received a message from the Galactic Council," Romo said, his voice carrying a note of concern. "There is a situation on Zelkari Prime that needs our attention." Ben set down his coffee and took the message pad from Romo. As he read the contents, his expression grew serious. The message explained that a Valen scientist named Nira had been arrested by the Zelkari authorities. She was being held in their main detention facility on charges of spying, but the Galactic Council believed these charges were false. "What makes this case special?" Ben asked, though he suspected there was more to the story. Romo's 4 hands moved nervously. "The scientist is pregnant, Ben. Valen females need very specific atmospheric conditions during pregnancy. The Zelkari facility cannot provide these conditions. Without proper care, both the mother and child will not survive." Ben felt a cold feeling in his stomach. He had worked with Valen scientists before, and knew they were peaceful people who valued knowledge above all else. The idea that one of them was suffering because of political games made him angry, but he kept his emotions under control. "How long does she have?" Ben asked. "Maybe 3 weeks, according to the medical reports," Romo replied. "The Galactic Council has sent diplomatic requests to the Zelkari government, but they refuse to release her. They claim she has dangerous information about their military installations." Ben walked over to the main computer terminal and began pulling up files about the Zelkari detention facility. As an engineer, he always believed that every problem had a solution. You just had to look at it from the right angle and use the right tools. The Zelkari were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and their stubborn nature. They built their structures to last for thousands of years and designed their security systems to be nearly impossible to break. Their main detention facility was considered one of the most secure buildings in their star system. "Romo, bring up the technical specifications for Zelkari power systems," Ben said, his mind already working on ideas. For the next several hours, Ben studied everything he could find about Zelkari technology. He learned about their power grid designs, their safety protocols, and their emergency procedures. The more he read, the more an idea began to form in his mind. The Zelkari were proud of their engineering, but they had one weakness that Ben could see clearly. They relied too heavily on automated systems and trusted their technology completely. Their detention facility was connected to the main power grid of their capital city, which meant it shared the same vulnerabilities. Ben knew that directly attacking the facility would be impossible and wrong. The Horizon was a research ship, not a warship, and Ben was not a soldier. But there might be another way to help Nira, a way that used intelligence instead of force. "Romo, I need you to contact Captain Walsh," Ben said. "Tell her I need to speak with her privately about the Valen scientist situation." Captain Sarah Walsh was the commander of the Horizon. She was the experienced leader who had spent 20 years working with different alien species. When Ben explained his idea to her in her private office, she listened carefully without interrupting. "You want to create a power failure that will force them to evacuate the detention facility?" Captain Walsh asked when Ben finished speaking. "Not just any power failure," Ben explained. "I can design a cascading overload that will make their entire power grid shut down safely. Their emergency protocols will require them to move all prisoners to medical stations with independent power supplies. In the confusion, we can help Nira escape." Captain Walsh leaned back in her chair thinking about the plan. "This is very risky, Ben. If the Zelkari discover what we did, it could cause serious problems between our governments." "Captain, I have studied their systems carefully," Ben said. "I can make the overload look like a natural failure caused by old equipment. They use power cores that are over 50 years old. A failure would not be surprising to anyone. The captain was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "What do you need from me?" "Permission to take a shuttle to Zelkari Prime," Ben said. "And maybe some help from our diplomatic team to get me close to their power grid." Captain Walsh nodded slowly. "I will contact Ambassador Quinn. She has connections with the Zelkari government. But Ben, if this goes wrong, I cannot protect you. Do you understand that?" Ben thought about Nira, alone in a cell, growing weaker every day while her child's life hung in the balance. He thought about all the peaceful Valen scientists he had worked with over the years, people who had never hurt anyone and only wanted to learn and share knowledge with others. "I understand, Captain," Ben said, "but I have to try." The next day, Ben found himself on a shuttle heading towards Zelkari Prime. Ambassador Quinn had arranged for him to visit the planet as part of a technical consultation about power grid efficiency. The Zelkari government was always interested in improving their technology, so they welcomed the visit from a human engineer. Ben spent his first day on the planet meeting with Zelkari engineers and touring their power facilities. He was impressed by their work, but he also noticed exactly what he had expected to find. Their systems were powerful and reliable, but they were also old and had some design flaws that could be exploited. That evening, Ben was given a tour of the capital city. His Zelkari guide, an engineer named Keth, was proud to show off their most important buildings. When they passed near the detention facility, Ben asked innocent questions about its power requirements. "The facility uses a lot of energy," Keth explained. "It has to maintain specific atmospheric conditions for different species. We connect it directly to the main grid because it needs constant, reliable power." Ben nodded and made notes on his tablet, acting like he was simply interested in their engineering solutions. But inside, he was memorizing every detail about the power connections and safety systems. On his second night on the planet, Ben put his plan into action. He had identified a maintenance access point to the main power grid that was located in a public building. Using his engineering credentials, he was able to get permission to inspect the power distribution systems as part of his consultation work. Working carefully and quietly, Ben installed several small devices that he had built aboard the Horizon. These devices would create a specific pattern of power fluctuations that would trigger the safety protocols in the Zelkari power grid. To anyone investigating later, it would look like the natural failure of aging equipment under stress. The devices were programmed to activate in exactly 24 hours, giving Ben time to get into position near the detention facility. He had also sent a coded message to Captain Walsh, asking her to have a shuttle ready for a quick departure from the planet. The next evening, Ben waited in a small cafe across from the detention facility, pretending to read reports on his tablet while keeping an eye on the building. At exactly 8:47 local time, the lights in the facility flickered once, then went out completely. Within minutes, emergency sirens began sounding throughout the capital city. The main power grid was shutting down in sections as the safety protocols activated to prevent damage to critical systems. Emergency lighting came on in important buildings, but most of the city was plunged into darkness. Ben watched as security vehicles rushed toward the detention facility. According to Zelkari emergency procedures, all prisoners had to be moved to facilities with independent power supplies within 1 hour of a total power failure. This was to ensure that life support systems would continue working for species that needed special atmospheric conditions. Moving carefully through the darkened streets, Ben approached the detention facility from the side where prisoner transport vehicles were being loaded. In the confusion of the emergency, security was focused on moving prisoners quickly and safely, rather than watching for potential threats. Ben had studied the facility's layout and knew that Valen prisoners would be housed in Section C, which required the specific atmospheric mixture that Nira's species needed to survive. As he had hoped, the evacuation was being conducted by species type to ensure that each group was moved to appropriate facilities. When the transport vehicle for Section C prisoners arrived at the temporary medical station, Ben was waiting nearby. He had changed into medical technician clothes that he had purchased earlier in the day. In the confusion of the emergency, with people rushing around in the darkness, one more medical worker was not noticed. As the prisoners were being moved into the medical station, Ben spotted Nira immediately. She was clearly pregnant and looked weak from her time in detention. Her pale blue skin had a grayish tint that Ben recognized as a sign of atmospheric poisoning in Valen people. Ben approached the Zelkari guard who was overseeing the prisoner transfer. "Excuse me," he said in his most professional voice. "I am Dr. Torres from the Emergency Medical Response Team. This Valen female needs immediate specialized care. I have been ordered to transport her to the advanced medical facility downtown." The guard looked tired and stressed from the long day of emergency procedures. He glanced at Ben's medical identification, which Ambassador Quinn had helped him obtain as part of his cover story for being on the planet. "Fine," the guard said. "Just get her the help she needs. We have been told that her species requires special treatment." Ben gently helped Nira to a medical transport vehicle that he had arranged to have waiting nearby. As they drove away from the medical station, he spoke to her quietly in the standard galactic language. "My name is Ben Torres," he said. "I am here to help you escape. We are going to get you to safety." Nira looked at him with surprise and hope. "You are human," she said, her voice weak but clear. "Why are you helping me?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Ben replied simply. "No one should suffer because of political games, especially not someone who is carrying a child." As they drove through the darkened city toward the spaceport, Ben explained his plan. A shuttle from the horizon was waiting to take them to safety. The power grid failure would keep the Zelkari authorities busy for hours, giving them time to escape before anyone realized that Nira was missing. "The power failure," Nira said, her eyes widening with understanding. "You caused it," Ben nodded. "I made it look like a natural equipment failure. The Zelkari engineers will spend weeks trying to figure out what went wrong with their old power cores. They will never suspect sabotage." As they reached the spaceport, Ben could see the lights of the Horizon's shuttle waiting for them. Captain Walsh had kept her promise and had the ship ready for a quick departure. Within minutes, they were aboard the shuttle and heading away from Zelkari Prime. As the planet grew smaller behind them, Nira placed her hand on her stomach and looked at Ben with tears in her eyes. "You have saved not just my life, but the life of my child," she said. "How can I ever repay such kindness?" Ben smiled and shook his head. "You do not need to repay anything. This is what humans do. We help others when they need it, especially when they cannot help themselves." The shuttle docked with the Horizon, and Ben helped Nira to the medical bay, where Dr. Kim immediately began treating her for the atmospheric poisoning she had suffered during her imprisonment. As Ben watched the medical team work to help Nira and ensure her child was healthy, he felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with his engineering accomplishments. He had used his skills not to build machines or solve technical problems, but to save lives. And as he would soon discover, this rescue was just the beginning of a story that would change his life forever. Behind them on Zelkari Prime, engineers worked through the night trying to understand how their power grid had failed so completely. They would never discover the truth about Ben's sabotage, and the incident would go down in their records as a mysterious but natural equipment failure that had somehow cascaded through their entire system. But aboard the Horizon, as Nira rested safely in the medical bay with her unborn child growing healthy and strong, Ben Torres had proven once again that human ingenuity and compassion could overcome even the most impossible challenges. 3 months had passed since Ben Torres rescued Nira from the Zelkari detention facility. During that time, the research vessel Horizon had become more than just a workplace for both of them. It had become their home. Dr. Kim had worked tirelessly to help Nira recover from the atmospheric poisoning she had suffered during her imprisonment. The Valen scientist was strong, but the weeks of breathing incorrect air mixtures had damaged her respiratory system and put stress on her pregnancy. With proper medical care and the right atmospheric conditions, however, both she and her unborn child were now thriving. Ben found himself spending more and more time in the medical bay, not because of any engineering problems, but because he wanted to check on Nira's progress. At first, he told himself he was just being a good friend, making sure the person he had risked everything to save was getting better. But as the days passed, he realized his feelings were becoming much deeper than simple friendship. Nira was unlike anyone Ben had ever met. Her mind was brilliant, capable of understanding complex scientific concepts that amazed even the other researchers aboard the ship. But more than her intelligence, Ben was drawn to her gentle nature and her endless curiosity about everything around her. Despite everything she had been through, she maintained a sense of wonder about the universe that reminded Ben why he had become a scientist in the first place. Ben, Neera said one morning as he brought her breakfast to the medical bay. Dr. Kim says I am healthy enough to leave the medical ward. I was wondering if you might help me find quarters somewhere on the ship. Ben felt his heart skip a beat. He had been hoping for this moment but had not wanted to rush Neera's recovery. Of course, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Actually, I have been thinking about that. The quarters next to mine are empty. They have been specially modified with atmospheric controls for different species. You would be able to adjust the air mixture to exactly what you and the baby need. Neera's face lit up with a smile that made Ben feel warm all over. That sounds perfect, she said. And it would be nice to have a friend nearby. As Ben helped Neera move into her new quarters, he couldn't help but notice how the space seemed to come alive with her presence. She had very few personal belongings, most of them scientific instruments and books that had been rescued from her laboratory before her arrest. But the way she arranged them made the sterile ship quarters feel like a real home. Ben, Neera said as she placed a small crystal sculpture on a shelf. I never properly thanked you for what you did. You risked your career, your freedom, perhaps even your life to save me. Why? Ben paused in his work of adjusting the atmospheric controls. It was a question he had asked himself many times over the past 3 months. I suppose, he said slowly, it comes down to something my mother taught me when I was young. She said that if you have the power to help someone and you choose not to, then you become responsible for their suffering. Neera nodded thoughtfully. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was, Ben said with a sad smile. She died when I was in college, but her lessons have stayed with me. She would have liked you, I think. Over the following weeks, Ben and Neera fell into a comfortable routine. They would eat breakfast together in the ship's dining hall, work on their respective projects during the day, and spend their evenings talking about science, philosophy, and their different homeworlds. Ben learned that Neera's people valued knowledge and peaceful cooperation above all else. They had no military and had never fought a war, preferring to solve conflicts through discussion and compromise. That must be why the Zelkari accused you of spying, Ben said one evening as they sat in the ship's observation lounge. Watching stars stream past through the large windows, they couldn't understand how someone could be interested in their technology without wanting to use it for warfare. Neera placed her hand on her growing belly. My research was about clean energy sources, she said. I wanted to learn how different civilizations solved their power needs, so I could help my own people develop better systems. The idea of using that knowledge to hurt others never occurred to me. Ben felt a surge of admiration for her innocence and her dedication to peaceful purposes. It made him even more determined to protect her and her child from anyone who might want to harm them. As Neera's pregnancy progressed, Ben found himself taking on an unofficial role as her caretaker. He learned about Valen pregnancy customs and made sure her quarters always had the right temperature and humidity. He researched Valen nutrition and worked with the ship's food preparation systems to create meals that would keep both mother and baby healthy. Captain Walsh noticed Ben's devotion to Neera and called him to her office one day. Ben, she said with a knowing smile, I think we need to talk about your feelings for our Valen guest. Ben felt his face turn red. Captain, I assure you that my relationship with Neera is completely professional. Ben, Captain Walsh said gently, I have been commanding ships for 20 years. I know what it looks like when someone falls in love. The question is, what are your intentions? Ben was quiet for a long moment. I care about her, Captain, more than I have ever cared about anyone, but I don't know if she feels the same way about me. We are from different species, different worlds. Maybe it's impossible. Love is never impossible, Ben, Captain Walsh said, but it does require honesty. If you don't tell her how you feel, you'll never know what might be possible. That evening, Ben found Neera in her quarters, reading a book about human engineering techniques. She looked up when he entered and he noticed that her pregnancy was now quite visible. In a few more weeks, she would give birth to her child. Neera, Ben said, sitting down beside her, I need to tell you something important. She closed her book and gave him her full attention. What is it, Ben? Ben took a deep breath, remembering Captain Walsh's advice about honesty. I think I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. I know we're from different species and different worlds, but these past few months have been the happiest of my life. I love spending time with you, I love talking with you, and I love the idea of helping you raise your child. Neera was quiet for so long that Ben began to worry he had made a terrible mistake. Finally, she reached out and took his hand in hers. "Ben," she said softly, "in Valen culture, we believe that love is not about species or appearance or even shared biology. Love is about finding someone whose mind connects with yours, whose heart beats in harmony with your own. I have been hoping you would say these words because I have been feeling the same way about you." Ben felt a wave of joy wash over him. "Really?" Nira nodded, tears of happiness in her eyes. "When you rescued me from that prison, you saved more than just my life. You showed me that there was still kindness in the universe, still people who would risk everything to help a stranger. How could I not love someone with such a beautiful heart?" From that night forward, Ben and Nira were partners in every sense of the word. They moved into larger quarters together and began planning for the arrival of Nira's baby. Ben read everything he could find about Valen child-rearing practices and worked with Dr. Kim to prepare for the birth. When Nira went into labor 6 weeks later, Ben was by her side throughout the entire process. Valen births were different from human births, requiring specific atmospheric conditions and special medical equipment. But Dr. Kim had prepared well, and everything went smoothly. When the baby was finally born, Ben felt his heart fill with an emotion he had never experienced before. The infant was tiny and perfect, with her mother's pale blue skin and large, curious eyes. Nira had decided to name her Kayla, which meant starlight in the Valen language. "She's beautiful," Ben whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "Would you like to hold her?" Nira asked. Ben carefully took Kayla in his arms, amazed by how light and fragile she felt. As he looked down at the baby, she opened her eyes and seemed to look directly at him. In that moment, Ben knew that this child was his daughter in every way that mattered, regardless of biology. "Hello, little Kayla," he said softly. "I'm your daddy." The months that followed were filled with the joys and challenges of new parenthood. Ben learned how to care for a Valen infant, from preparing her special food to maintaining the atmospheric conditions she needed to stay healthy. Nira taught him traditional Valen lullabies, and Ben shared human stories and songs with baby Kayla. The crew of the Horizon became like an extended family to them. Romo crafted beautiful toys for Kayla with his 4 hands, and Dr. Kim monitored her development carefully to ensure she was growing properly. Captain Walsh often stopped by their quarters to visit, bringing gifts and sharing stories about her own experiences as a mother. But their peaceful life was interrupted one day when the ship's communications officer received an urgent message. Captain Walsh called Ben and Nira to the bridge to hear the news together. "The Zelkari government has been tracking our ship," Captain Walsh explained. "They have discovered that Nira escaped during the power grid failure, and they want her returned to face trial." Ben felt his protective instincts flare up immediately. "They can't have her," he said firmly. "We won't let them take her or Kayla." "The situation is complicated," Captain Walsh continued. "The Zelkari are claiming that Nira stole classified information about their military installations. They are demanding that the Galactic Council force us to return her." Nira held Kayla closer to her chest, fear evident in her eyes. "What are we going to do?" Ben put his arm around Nira's shoulders. "We're going to fight this," he said, "but we're going to do it the right way, through legal channels and diplomatic pressure." Over the next several weeks, Ben worked tirelessly to build a case for Nira's innocence. He contacted scientists throughout the galaxy who could testify to her peaceful nature and her dedication to beneficial research. He also reached out to his contacts in human government, asking them to pressure the Galactic Council to protect Nira and her child. The breakthrough came when Ambassador Quinn discovered something interesting in the Zelkari government files. The charges against Nira had been fabricated by a small group of military officials who wanted to steal her research for their own weapons development program. When this corruption was exposed, the legitimate Zelkari government was embarrassed and eager to make amends. "The charges against you have been dropped," Captain Walsh announced to Ben and Nira one morning. "In fact, the Zelkari government wants to offer you both positions at their new Peaceful Research Institute. They're trying to rebuild their reputation after the corruption scandal." Ben and Nira looked at each other, then at baby Kayla sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. "Thank you for the offer," Ben said, "but I think we have other plans." "What kind of plans?" Captain Walsh asked with a smile. "We want to start our own research station," Nira explained. "A place where scientists from all species can work together on projects that benefit everyone." No military applications, no weapons research, just pure scientific exploration. Ben nodded enthusiastically. I've been talking to some of my old colleagues about funding. There's a lot of interest in the kind of peaceful cooperation that NERA represents. 6 months later, Ben, Nira, and Kayla stood on the observation deck of their new home, Research Station Unity, located in neutral space between several star systems. The station was small but well-equipped, with laboratories for dozens of different scientific disciplines and living quarters for researchers from many different species. Ben had designed the station's power systems himself, incorporating both human engineering principles and Valen energy efficiency techniques. The result was a facility that was both powerful and environmentally friendly, a perfect symbol of what could be accomplished when different species worked together. Look, Kyla, Nira said, holding their 1-year-old daughter up to the window. This is our home. This is where Daddy and Mommy work to make the universe a better place. Kayla gurgled happily and reached her tiny hands toward the stars visible outside the window. She was growing quickly and already showed signs of inheriting both her mother's intelligence and her father's curiosity about how things worked. Do you think she'll want to be a scientist like us? Ben asked, watching his daughter with pride. I think she'll want to be whatever makes her happy, Nira replied. That's what we'll teach her, to follow her heart and use her talents to help others. Ben put his arms around his family and looked out at the vast expanse of space surrounding their station. 3 years ago, he had been a lonely engineer working on a research ship, focused only on his technical duties. Now he was a husband, a father, and the co-founder of one of the most innovative research facilities in the galaxy. I love you both, he said quietly. We love you too, Nira replied, leaning against his shoulder while Kala played with a toy that Romo had made for her. As they stood together watching the stars, Ben reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a simple decision to help someone in need, but it had grown into something much larger, a new family, a new home, and a new mission to use science and technology to bring different species together in peace. The research station was already attracting visitors from across the galaxy, scientists who were drawn by the promise of collaborative research and the example of human-Valen cooperation that Ben and Nira represented. Applications were pouring in from young researchers who wanted to work in an environment free from military pressure and political interference. Daddy, Kayla said suddenly, speaking one of her first clear words. Ben's heart melted with happiness. Yes, sweetheart, I'm your daddy. As the three of them continued to watch the stars, Ben knew that they had found something precious and rare, a love that transcended species, a family built on choice rather than biology, and a future filled with infinite possibilities. The man who had once blown up an enemy base to save an alien woman had discovered that the greatest adventure of all was simply learning to love and be loved in return. Their story had become legendary among the crews of other research vessels, a tale of human courage and compassion that inspired others to take risks for the sake of helping those in need. But for Ben, Nira, and little Kayla, it was simply the beginning of their life together as a family among the stars.